Hi there. So I just completed a 12-day water fast. It started out as a water fast, it ended up being a bone broth fast, which was much more helpful in terms of not feeling hungry. And I'll just tell you how I went about doing it and how I prepared, and then what the results were. I went 1 week without caffeine, so just normal diet, but wanted to cut out caffeine in case I was going to stop coffee, and I didn't want to get the coffee headaches when I was fasting. So 1 week with no caffeine. The next week, no carbs whatsoever, no sugar, no vegetables, no fruit, just protein and fats. So meats, fish, chicken, and plenty of oil because I didn't mind ramping up my fat intake. And sometimes if I was just still a bit hungry, I would have like a spoonful of coconut oil, and I would just add that to maybe caffeine-free coffee, and so I would have much more fat in my day. And then on the second day of the weekend, each time is when I bring in the new phase. So then on a Saturday, because we start working here on a Sunday, I would stop. So after 2 weeks of getting into it, and I was already in ketosis by this point because I'd had 1 week with no carbs, when I stopped it was relatively easy. You're a bit tired at first, but you're already in ketosis, and you start to get bored because you realise food is pretty much an addiction that we like every day, but you're not particularly hungry. As time went on, you get less and less hungry anyway because you just don't need it. But after 4 days, I started on bone broth, which I had made using a couple of kilos of bones, just pressure cooked down. I would advise, if you make bone broth, pressure cook it for like an hour. Let it come off the boil, take off any meat from the bone, put it to one side that you could then use later. It would be super soft. I pop mine in the freezer. And then with the bones, I was advised online 4 hours to pressure cook. Didn't really break it down enough. So I do it for a minimum of 6 hours just to do it for longer. Lamb bones did break down, and those that didn't, I blended. And the beef bones, the marrow didn't really come out, it softened, so that's why I do it for longer, like 6 hours plus in a pressure cooker. And no, the water didn't boil off or anything like that, so there was no worry, there wasn't a large loss of water. I was then, for 4 days I went with just water, and then maybe 9 days, bone broth for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and I put seasoning in it, so it was actually really delicious, and it did fill me up. Anytime I was bored and hungry or just wanted food, I'd have a bone broth, and I was like just back to normal, had the energy to do what I wanted to do. I still had my so it was easy enough to do, and I could have definitely gone on for a lot longer. I did lose plenty of weight. I don't know if it was all fat. I lost a good amount of fat, but I probably lost a bit of muscle too. In terms of what I was able to do, I could go for like a 6-kilometer walk. That was the longest I did. But your muscles are weaker. When I say weaker, they feel like they're strained, like you haven't stretched them properly, and they're tight. And sometimes I would get a little short of breath a little earlier, but I also got short of breath before because I had indigestion problems. So I'll tell you the reason why I started and what the results were. I have had some digestion problems for the last 2 years. I have been burping excessively, a lot of gas in my gut, farting a lot, sometimes more than 300 times a day, burping and farting. And I would get extremely tired after food, and sometimes I would be breathless for days, maybe up to a week, because I would have such inflammation that possibly what was happening is that my intestines were pushing against my lungs and reducing my breathing capacity, and various different things didn't work, medications didn't work, so the problem was always food. So I thought, fine, I'm going to rule out food. So 12 days without food, and I was supposed to get back into food slowly, but I didn't really. I just had quite a bit when I went back onto food. I had fruit salad, and then I finished someone's lamb chops. And then yesterday when I said I would have completely allergen-free, so I would have like Huel gluten-free powder, I went out with a friend, and instead I had a cheese platter, 2 glasses of wine, and then a cocktail. And that contained obviously the bread, so the gluten, the jam, so the sugars, fruit because I had grapes, I mean grapes, not just in the wine, but grapes. And dairy. So I expected to be pretty unwell from that. I got pretty screwed up before from a cheeseburger, a really good cheeseburger from Ting Irie in Dubai. But that put me on my back for about 4 or 5 days. So I expected to be potentially unwell, but I was even limbered up because I had 2 glasses of wine for the first time in more than a month. And everything was fine. No bloating when I went to bed, no gas. Now, I am still burping, but not crazy amounts, and I don't have incredible lower gas. Do I have crazy good energy levels now? No, but do I feel ill? No. So the next step for me was going to be a colonoscopy and an endoscopy, and that's quite extreme apparently, and the doctors don't really like to do that if they can avoid it, or just scan you. So if you're thinking about it and you do want to water fast, or in this case bone broth fast, I wouldn't recommend stopping food and then going into it. I would recommend you get into ketosis first. And if you're going to be cutting out caffeine, then I'd recommend you I did one thing at a time, because I know from doing it before, one burp, I know from doing it before that stopping caffeine is going to give you a headache for about a week. Stopping sugars could give you a headache for about a week. Going into ketosis dehydrates you, that's going to give you a headache. So if you can break those things up, it's fine. And also, knowing that it took me 2 weeks to get to the stage where I started, it's not like I was going to break it so easily. So, pardon me, still burping a bit. So all in all, it was 1 month for me, and I've seen good results so far. This for me is not a serious amount of burping. It's pretty fine. I'd recommend it from my limited experience, and just say don't do it all at once. Break up how you get into the fast. Caffeine, sugars, carbs, fast, and then when you get hungry, bone broth. I made my own. It's very easy. I did buy it once. I actually thought mine was better because I did it with lamb bones and beef bones. The lamb bones were a fraction of the price. Thank you very much for paying attention. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them and I will do my best to answer.